Joining us, MS Now political analyst, Democratic strategist, and former executive director of the New York State Democratic Party, Basil Smikle, host of the Fast Politics podcast, and MS Now political analyst, Molly Jong-Fast, and reporter for the Maine Morning Star, Emma Davis. Peter Baker still with us as well. Emma, I'll begin with you. What is our latest understanding of what's up with Graham Plattner? If it's a question of when, not if, when will he drop out of the race?
Yeah, so it's still a question we all are looking for the answer to. I did speak just this morning to a person familiar with Plattner's campaign's internal conversations who told me that his two top political strategists have been telling him to step down following the sexual assault accusation. This person who spoke on the condition of anonymity said the strategists made a final push last night and that Plattner seems to have come to terms with dropping out, but as of now, he has yet to officially do so.
Okay, so it's going to put the party in something of a vice. Emma, what is the party prepared to do?
Yeah, so we actually know little about what the process will actually look like at this time. Maine law stipulates dates for when the decision has to be made, but it does not say how the party has to make the determination. We heard from the Democratic Party here in Maine last night who said that they will not make that process public until Plattner does officially drop out, if he does do so. So a lot of it is still up in the air, unfortunately.
So we're in a situation now, guys, which feels a little bit like Kamala Harris and Joe Biden for the Democratic Party. How does the party avoid many people will call it a mistake, the mistake of anointing somebody without the voters having a say?
Well, to Emma's point, there's probably not, there are state laws, but, you know, there are also party rules. And then there's what you should do.
Yeah.
And what you should do is have as public a process as possible. Every state party has some contingency for what you do when your candidate can't continue to run. There's like a committee to fill vacancies. Everybody has that. But that actually is a very small, very closed process. And what I think is going to be called for here is something that is far more open, far more transparent, and something that allows the supporters of Plattner to be a part of the process, even if Plattner wants to be part of it himself, which it sounds like it doesn't, sounds like they don't want. Mm-hmm. And so it needs to be more transparent to avoid the anointing issue.
Yeah, I mean, the reporting is that Plattner wants to have some leverage here. He wants somebody who can take up the mantle that he was pushing, more progressive, more focused on working class issues, working class policies, more of a change candidate, not a mainstream Democratic Party person, maybe like a Janet Mills.
So I would like to pull back here for a minute and just talk about how we got here, because, you know, a lot of us, I interviewed him for my podcast. I've talked to his team. When the first New York Times article came out, I said, this reads sort of funny. What else is there? Is there something else coming out? And everyone told me up and down, absolutely not. And I think all of us heard that same thing from him, from his team, nothing else coming out. This is clearly a misunderstanding. There's nothing more coming out. We were sold an arc, right? A character arc of a person who had blacked out, but now no longer did that behavior. Now, I should have asked him when I interviewed him if he was drinking still, because there's only one way you get those blackouts, and that's from drinking. And so the idea we were sold this character arc, this person who gets better, who got better, but he wasn't maybe better. And so I just think the fact that he feels he has so much capital still is sort of striking to me.
Yeah, well, so you're jumping ahead, and I don't mind it, because I want to get to this point that was made by Kat Rosenfield. She diagnoses the Democratic Party's search for somebody like Plattner this way. She says this is not about the Maine electorate. It's not even about Plattner. It's about members of the progressive elite wanting to shed the unflattering image of themselves as the perpetually offended HR department of politics in favor of something rougher, tougher, and more relatable. It is reasonable when you're all in on trying to distance yourself from a pearl-clutching past to equivocate on something like an ill-advised tattoo or an extramarital affair. Who among us has not raped his paramour during a home invasion, on the other hand, requires you to cross the line from sunk cost fallacy into outright depravity. And this is where the Democratic Party is drawing the line. But what do you make of this argument that they were searching for authenticity and willing to overlook too much in the process?
I mean, it's easy to say that now. As someone, I got sober when I was 19. So I should have known, as someone who's 28 and a half years sober, when I was listening to this story. I mean, I am a person who should have known that drinking was an issue and should have asked him. Like, I hold myself as responsible as anyone for this. I should have said, okay, you're not having blackouts anymore. That means you're not drinking anymore. And I didn't ask that question. And so as much as this is on all of us. And the truth is, we are a culture where alcoholism is not talked about, where drinking is not, all of these women describe a person who is very drunk and apologizing. So clearly, this is about drinking.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a question of redemption, but what do you think of on the bigger issue of what the Democratic Party has been searching for?
It's a great question and a great point, because there was another article, I think it was in Slate, and forgive me for not remembering the author's name, but talked about the importance of having this kind of masculine candidate to appeal to the masculinity that the right seems to be dominating. And I think this is a really important question, because there's this Venn diagram of electability, accountability, and power. Who's the candidate that's going to kind of solve that issue and be at that intersection? And I think there was this concern that we just needed somebody to win, and we had to bring in all of these folks that might have been attracted to Donald Trump or to the right. And here is the one candidate that solves that problem, but at what cost?
Yeah, listen, we have just to insert, Graham Plattner has denied all these allegations. I just want to say that we also don't know if he's still drinking. I just want to put that out there. And I want to get Peter Baker in, because we have to take a break in a moment. We're going to come back to the full conversation. But Peter, part of this is the Democratic Party's image has been in the tank. The party is not seen well by most American voters. They're benefiting right now because Donald Trump is doing so poorly on pretty much everything. But there still is, the party still has, it's still struggling with trying to define who it is and who it wants to appeal to. And we're seeing that within the party, with Democratic Socialists vying for attention, but also leadership roles, and the more mainstream part of the party is saying we got to have people who know what they're doing and can appeal to a broader set of Americans. So how do they deal with a situation like Plattner, where they tried to go off and find somebody authentic and not part of the establishment, but now find themselves in a position of searching for anybody that could possibly save this Maine Senate seat?
Yeah. There is always a risk, of course, when you go for a candidate who's not tested. And this is, the appeal and the danger, right? Somebody who's never been out there before. That's, thank goodness, because we think the system is broken. Let's get an outsider who's not part of the corrupt, establishment, but then hasn't been through the vetting that, having run for past elections would automatically provide. And then, of course, the warning signs were there with this guy. People chose not to see them because they did want somebody who seemed authentic, or whatever you want to say, whatever you want to call him. And it blew up in their face. And now this choice in the next 2 weeks, assuming he does drop out, will put this to the test. Put aside Plattner. Nobody thinks that Plattner in Maine, it seems like, should have a role in deciding who his replacement might be should he drop out. But if you're a progressive who thinks you won the primary fair and square by electing him over Janet Mills, or pushing Janet Mills out of the race because she wasn't popular and a creature of the establishment, it looks like a betrayal if the person that the party then ultimately picks is one of these people from the establishment. Yet, if you have somebody at the last second you're trying to insert, how much of a chance do you take? And that's the real conundrum here for a party that is, desperate to win this seat. This should be the most winnable seat held by a Republican in the Senate for the Democrats this fall. Susan Collins is on the edge here. And if they lose this seat, their chances of taking the Senate for the Democrats is pretty hard to see.